Q&A Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @QuenReview, that is @CuenReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@quenreview.com, that is INFORMATION@CuenReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976, that's 0141 772 3976.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of November, from the Voices section, Letter of the Day. Suella Braverman forgot what Second World War was fought for. Rishi Sunak's reshuffle has prompted much discussion, notably over the sacking of Suella Braverman and the PM's decision to replace her with David Cameron. Yesterday, one of our readers defended Ms Braverman, saying she had been right to call out the Metropolitan Police. Today, however, a correspondent argues we should be glad that she has gone. Ken Mackay of Glasgow writes, I cannot let Jane Laxey's letter, November 14th, go without comment. Suella Braverman was wrong in so many counts and suffers from a distinct lack of memory. Ms Braverman forgot that the Second World War was fought to maintain freedom of speech, including peaceful protest. She forgot that the right-wingers who caused mayhem on the day were encouraged by her rhetoric. She forgot that she was only an elected custodian of the Home Office and did not have the authority to order people about to suit her own views. She forgot that the will of the people is paramount, and a peaceful demonstration, reputedly the largest since the war, is a clear sign that people are saying to the government, we want peace. Exactly what Remembrance Day should signify. Most of all, she's forgotten her own roots. Let us be glad she is gone. And that was the letter of the day from the letters page by Ken Mackay. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of November, from the Voices section. Tories Jeremy Hunt and David Cameron are enemies of growth. Article by Ian McConnell, Group Business Editor. Jeremy Hunt has failed on many fronts since becoming Chancellor, but he has surely achieved one thing consistently, being entirely out of touch with the plight of households and businesses affected by the Tories' myriad economic policy failures. Mr Hunt, of course, has previous, when it comes to what is best, a staggering lack of awareness of everyday reality for ordinary people, assuming that it is not simply that he does not care. Some people might think that is a big assumption, given how he comes across and the policies of the administrations of which he has been part, and it is up to individuals to form their own views on this. We should not forget, when it comes to previous, that Mr Hunt was part of the David Cameron and George Osborne administration that visited such savage austerity upon the UK and its people, including grim welfare cuts and public sector pay freezes, after winning power in 2010. Sadly, this austerity, which it must be noted has proved to be entirely counterproductive from an economic perspective, has continued relentlessly, with all the misery that has brought, and crucially continues to bring, for so many households. This savage austerity was the first thing that came to mind on observing a grinning Mr Cameron returning to the Tory front line with his appointment as Foreign Secretary this week. Mr Hunt, who became Chancellor last autumn, declared on the X social media platform last Friday, high inflation is the single greatest barrier to economic growth. The best way to sustainably grow our economy right now is to stick to our plan and knock inflation on the head. He gave his latest peculiar take on the UK's predicament after official figures showed the country's economy stagnated in the third quarter. There are, as always it seems when Mr Hunt opens his mouth about the economy, some points that it is well worth clarifying. What Mr Hunt says about a plan to knock inflation on the head is confusing. It is the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee which is targeted with keeping annual consumer prices index inflation at 2%, and this remit has not changed since 2004. The bank has, of course, hiked UK base rates from a record low of 0.1% in December to 5.25%. However, in terms of Mr Hunt talking about the Tory plan to knock inflation on the head, we should remember that the Bank of England has independence in setting interest rates. However, that is not where the holes in Mr Hunt's reasoning or messaging, depending on how you look at it, end. Many experts have highlighted the part of the Tory hard Brexit in fueling inflation through sending the price of food and imports in general upwards, for example. The non-tariff barriers arising from the ending of frictionless trade with the European Economic Area have been among the factors playing a part here. Then there is the plunge in sterling which followed the 2016 Brexit vote. Sterling's weakness has persisted, and a weak currency makes imports more expensive. Then we have the upward pressure on salaries and wages arising from the skill and labour shortages, fueled by the end of the free movement of people between the UK and EEA in the wake of the hard Brexit. So the Tories have undoubtedly had an impact on inflation. They've fueled it. Mr Hunt was once a Remainer. However, since he returned to the Cabinet, he has certainly not been critical of Brexit. He has at times tried to talk it up, albeit this has obviously been generally fruitless given any significant benefits remain conspicuous by their absence. There is, of course, rightly much debate about the extent to which the MPC has raised UK base rates so far, and the committee has signalled it may, depending on how things go from here, not be done yet. There seems to be a distinct lack of heed to the lagged effect of the surge in interest rates we have already seen. Enormous numbers of people are seeing fixed rate mortgages coming to an end, with a consequent hike in their interest costs. And businesses, many of them still reeling from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, and the consumer-facing ones also under pressure from the intensifying strain on household finances, have also faced a surge in the cost of servicing their borrowings. Mr Hunt, judging by his comments last Friday, seems not to care that much in any case about the dampening effect on growth of the very sharp rise in interest rates. So what else did the Chancellor have to say on X last week? He declared, "The autumn statement will be about how we get the economy growing healthily again for the long term, unlocking investment, getting people back into work and making our economy more productive." The Tories have had many years to get the UK economy growing for the long term, and they have failed spectacularly to do that, so chance would be a fine thing. Even as they have choked off growth and decided to give the impression of being good for the public finances, underlying public sector net debt has surged. Public sector net debt, on the measure which excludes the Bank of England and public sector banks, had already climbed from around £1 trillion when the Conservatives came to power in 2010 to more than £1.6 trillion ahead of the coronavirus pandemic. It had, by September this year, climbed to £2.37 trillion. Mr Hunt could, of course, but will not, even with his austerity pal and Remainer Mr Cameron returning to the Cabinet as Foreign Secretary, move to stimulate the UK economy relatively quickly with a swift return to the European single market. Rejoining the European Union would take much longer, but renewed single market membership would be more straightforward, although only if you exclude the fact that it would be anathema to the ruling Tory Brexiteers. The Chancellor last week surely added insult to injury for hard-pressed households with a curious perspective that might also feel was delivered in a particularly patronising manner. He told Sky News he believes families can be more optimistic. The Chancellor said, "I know how tough it has been, but you see the progress we are making in bringing down inflation, which has been the biggest single cause of pressure, as people have seen the cost of their weekly shop go up, the cost of filling up the car go up. It is the Tories who have made life tough for ordinary people with their awful policy making." Referring to last Friday's gross domestic product figures from the Office of National Statistics, which showed the UK economy had not grown at all between the second and third quarters, Mr Hunt said, "The message of today is the economy is more resilient than many people thought, and that gives us hope for the future." The consensus forecast among economists had been that the UK economy would have contracted by 0.1% quarter on quarter in the 3 months to September. Surely, however, Mr Hunt is not celebrating stagnation as opposed to a 0.1% fall. The Chancellor has talked more than once about inflation being the enemy. Some might surely, with good cause, given all that has happened since Mr Cameron came to power in 2010 with the help of the Liberal Democrats, consider the Tories to be the enemy of economic prosperity and living standards in the UK. And that was a Voices piece by Ian McConnell, Group Business Editor.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 16th of November 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Murder at Holly House by Denzel Merrick is a change of direction by Alistair Mabbitt. Murder at Holly House, Denzel Merrick, Bantam, £16.99. Nestling inside its festive-looking book jacket, Murder at Holly House marks a change in tone for Denzel Merrick, best known for the darker and grittier thrillers charting the beleaguered DCI Daily's attempts to combat crime in the west of Scotland. The first of the memoirs of Frank Gadsby, and dedicated to Merrick's late grandfather Cyril Pinckney, a Yorkshireman to his bootstraps, this murder mystery is set just before Christmas 1952 in the remote town of Elderby in Yorkshire. Inspector Frank Gadsby, who is more accustomed to treading the streets of York, has been banished there by his superiors after an embarrassing incident involving the escape of 20 of an aristocrat's thoroughbred horses during the arrest of a suspect. It's the kind of setting that brings a glow to the cheeks of nostalgic boomers. A tightly knit rural community centred on a pub and a church, which, despite its size, can support a butcher, baker, greengrocer, fishmonger, and somehow a milliner's. With Christmas only a few days away, it's covered in a picturesque blanket of snow. Elderby sounds idyllic, but we're not allowed to forget the awful food, the privations of rationing, the bleak chill of a northern winter, and the mental scars of a recent world war. In his exile, Gadsby has been ordered to investigate a spate of robberies that have taken place in the area. Raised by a clergyman who has never shied away from humiliating and denigrating him, the inspector has a bit of an attitude and doesn't take this demotion well. But the town has piqued his curiosity. Alongside the expected local characters, he's surprised to find two Americans. One, Dee Dee, is a mature student from Yale studying criminology who works as an intern, brackets, a new and unfamiliar concept, close brackets, at the police station. The other is a US journalist who reported in the D-Day landings and is now married to the local GP. Gadsby's new sergeant has narcolepsy and can fall asleep without warning. Odder still, the digs he's been assigned are like something from an Edgar Allan Poe story, presided over by a woman we might nowadays describe as an ageing goth, complete with her own raven. War veteran Gadsby can take all this in his stride, but when he finds a corpse stuck up the chimney of the local landowner, Lord Damnish, things start to get properly strange. It slowly emerges that there's a lot more going on than a few burglaries and internecine warfare between branches of the Damnish family. When the top brass instruct Gadsby to mount a cover-up, the former soldier decides somewhat reluctantly to comply. But what can a man do when information just keeps falling into his lap? And what's almost as maddening, how does Gadsby's spiritualist landlady know so much about his churchly dad? Frank Gadsby is a likeable protagonist, resilient, a tad roguish, made cynical and prickly by a lifetime of being put down by his dad and his experiences in the war. But when he decides to do the right thing, he'll put his heart and soul into it. He recounts his adventures with a swagger and a sly, ironic glint, but he's not afraid to own up to his weaknesses. Murder at Holly House is much lighter and more humorous than Merrick's usual fare, but he does it without sacrificing high stakes or tension. There's murder, beatings, and a genuine conspiracy with potentially far-reaching consequences, but it's a hugely entertaining yarn with an authentic period feel, making it a satisfying escapist yarn for the cold, dark nights ahead. By Alistair Mabbitt.
This is from the Herald, Scotland, on Thursday the 16th of November 2023, from the news section. Glasgow City Council launches a new litter lotto. This article is written by Katrina Stewart. The tagline is "Turn trash into cash," but will a new litter lottery be enough to persuade cynical Glaswegians to pick up their rubbish? Complaints about the state of Glasgow's litter-strewn streets have long been made, and now council executives are trying a new tack to tackle the issue of littering. Glasgow City Council has joined the UK-wide Litter Lotto initiative to encourage more people to use street bins. It spends around £20 million a year on street cleaning and says anything to stop litter being dropped is worth trying. Anyone aged over 18 can download an app on their mobile device, upload a photo of themselves putting rubbish in a council bin, then enter a prize draw. A monthly prize of £100 is up for grabs, and people can enter as many times as they like to give them a chance to be chosen at random to win the cash prize. The household bin, the council is at pains to point out, doesn't count. It also doesn't qualify if the bin is full, so leaving litter on top or beside the bin is out too. Councillor Rory Kelly, Glasgow convener for Neighbourhood Services, encouraged people to download the free app and get involved. He said, "Glasgow's Litter Lotto is a novel and exciting way to encourage people to bin their litter when out and about in the city. This Litter Lotto pilot is another string in our bow to encourage positive behavioural change and foster good habits. Litter Lotto is an incentive for more people to dispose of their litter responsibly, helping to keep the city clean and enabling them to be in with a chance of winning prizes. Glasgow has around 500 neighbourhood improvement volunteers who pick up litter and a network of over 80 litter-picking hubs across the city to enable people to borrow equipment to carry out litter picks in their area. As well as a monthly Glasgow cash prize, entrants will also be entered into a national draw for KSB's monthly £200 Litter Lotto prize and Litter Lotto's weekly £1,000 UK-wide prize. The winners will be chosen at random by Litter Lotto. Participants can also collect virtual coins, which are hidden in locations around the city and which can be exchanged for prizes within the app. David Landsberg, founder of Litter Lotto, said, "Myself and the Litter Lotto team are delighted to welcome Scotland's biggest local authority, Glasgow City Council, to partner with us. If you had told me when we launched Litter Lotto that in just 18 months we'd have given away hundreds of thousands of pounds in prizes and seen over 10 million pieces of litter binned through our app, I would have been blown away. It's thanks to Keep Scotland Beautiful, our fantastic partnering councils, and the great work of their residents that we're achieving such impressive results. Litter Lotto is already used by local authorities in England. South Ayrshire Council in Scotland also joined forces with Litter Lotto to encourage behavioural change in their area. KSB has been running a Scotland-wide Litter Lotto draw for over a year. Barry Fisher, Chief Executive at Keep Scotland Beautiful, said, "It's wonderful to partner with Glasgow City Council and Litter Lotto and take another positive step towards tackling the litter emergency. Data from our forthcoming Scottish Litter Survey has shown that the majority of people view litter as a problem, both nationally and locally. Everyone has a role to play as we battle the litter issue, and we are determined to find new ways to engage and inspire Scotland's people to reverse the data trends. That is why we are delighted to be working with Litter Lotto and Glasgow City Council to bring this innovative app to the city to promote behavioural change in a fun way." That article was written by Katrina Stewart. This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 16th of November 2023 from the news section. Scottish Parliament publishes Matheson's £11,000 data roaming bill. This article is written by Andrew Learmonth. Humza Yousaf has attempted to draw a line under the row over Michael Matheson's £11,000 data roaming bill, insisting that for him the matter is now closed. However, the First Minister's assertion came as the Scottish Parliament published the full billing it holds data charges incurred by the Minister during his holiday to Morocco. The EE statement suggests that the Minister's £10,935.74p bill was used for roughly 7 gigabytes of data between December the 28th and January the 3rd. The bill does not reveal the websites visited or the apps used. The breakdown shows Mr Matheson incurred the highest charges on December the 28th, where 1.26 gigabyte of data cost £2,249.17, and January the 2nd, where 3.89 gigabytes of data cost £8,666.39. Mr Matheson has always insisted the costs related solely to parliamentary and constituency-related work that he carried out during the trip. However, there are questions over what amount of work he was doing on January the 2nd to use nearly 4 gigabytes of data. According to EE, sending 175 emails every day for a month would use 2 gigabytes. Using twice that in a day would be more in line with streaming films or TV shows or football matches. The bill was published as Presiding Officer Alison Johnston announced an urgent review of the Scottish Parliament's policies on mobile devices and data roaming charges for MSPs. The review was triggered by the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body and will look at options on disabling SIM cards, a mandatory opt-in to data roaming bundles, and personal liability for MSPs where Parliament's procedures have not been followed. Ms Johnstone said, "This is an issue which I and the SPCB take very seriously. We must be in a position where we have reviewed and tightened all policies to ensure the present situation cannot happen again. The policy review will also set out the circumstances and cost thresholds for out-of-the-ordinary bills to be escalated to the SPCB for specific sign-off. This will ensure full transparency and full accountability. It is vital that we have every confidence in the expenses scheme and that its integrity is maintained." The presiding officer said Mr Matheson had acknowledged he failed to update his SIM card and incurred significant charges as a result. Initially, the SNP minister was only going to pay £3,000 towards the cost from his expenses budget, with the Scottish Parliament agreeing to pay the rest. However, last week, following days of controversy over the whopper of an invoice, Mr Matheson agreed to pay back £10,935.74 in full. Asked if the row was distracting the Health Secretary as the NHS faces another challenging winter, Mr Yousaf told the PA news agency, "Michael isn't distracted, that is the entire point." He said that he had spoken to Mr Matheson at length during Tuesday's Cabinet meeting about the NHS. "It is an issue he is entirely focused on," Mr Yousaf said. "For me, the matter is now closed. He has agreed to pay back every single penny of that expense, even though the Parliament wasn't asking him to do so." Mr Yousaf said Mr Matheson had agreed to pay the money back given the honest mistake he has made in relation to the updating of the SIM card. The First Minister added, "To me, that is a line drawn under the matter." The Scottish Conservatives say there are still questions to answer. Party Chairman Craig Hoy said, "Humza Yousaf is deluding himself if he reckons that Michael Matheson belatedly being shamed into paying back this huge bill is the end of this scandal. The First Minister is saying anything to keep his pal in a job. Last week he insisted it was a legitimate expense that the Health Secretary had no need to pay. Today he's claiming by paying it back the case is closed." Humza Yousaf knows perfectly well that the only way for Michael Matheson to retain a semblance of integrity is by handing over his iPad to the Parliament's IT department so that they can check its browser history. That's the only means of verifying Michael Matheson's assurance that the roaming charges were accrued solely on constituency work. If he fails to take this action, which is clearly in his own best interests, the public will draw their own conclusions on what he is trying to hide, and the Scottish Conservatives will table a no-confidence motion in him tomorrow. That article was written by Andrew Learmonth.
Herald Scotland recorded on Friday 17th of November 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Emma Gray, Scots author in her new children's book, by James McEnany. Education writer James McEnany speaks to Emma Gray, author of Be Good to Your Mammy, Scots Book of the Year 2022, and The Tongue She Speaks, about writing in Scots in her new children's book, The Hullet That Couldn't Fly. This is your third book, with a fourth to come soon, and all of them have been written in Scots. Why did you decide to write in that language rather than English? It started because I was drunk one night. Me and my friend were in a bar in Sauchiehall Street. This was 10 years ago in February, and we were students at the time. We were drinking and she was like, I really want to write To a Mouse as To a Selfie. So she did that and it was a big hit. And then we kept going back to the same bar and we would just be drinking and we'd start writing in Scots. Just little poems to make ourselves laugh, and then it kind of went from there. Honestly, I find it easier to write in Scots than I do in English, which is hilarious because my day job involves writing in English. But when it comes to writing for pleasure and writing stories that I think people would want to read and would really entertain them, I think Scots is the best way to do it, for me anyway. I guess when I write in English, I'm telling other people's stories all the time. They're not my stories and I'm just a vessel for them to come into the world. Whereas in Scots, it's like it's my stories and there's a very clear world in my head. So although all these books are very different, they're all set in the same town, all the voices are the same, it's just different generations. It's almost like you're looking into different windows in this little town and they all talk the same way, and I think when you're writing character-driven stuff, Scots is just a really powerful way of telling it. The Hullet That Couldn't Fly is all about a bird with a bad wing that disappears. Where did the inspiration for that story come from? I went to Moniac Vor writing retreat in the Highlands and I just thought, right, I've got a week here, let's see what I do. They asked us to just try to think about turning points in our life and all that sort of stuff, and I was thinking that I'd already used everything or it's going to be the next novel. But then you think about the age of the person you want to write from, and then think about turning points when you were that age. So then I was looking further back and thinking about when I was younger and remembered that my rabbit got eaten by a fox. It was the most traumatic thing that had happened to me, so I thought that was sort of a starting point. But also, years and years and years ago, I volunteered at a bird of prey centre just near Loch Lomond. I've always thought I should write about those birds, because I know the birds really, really well, and it just never came up. But I've still got photos of them and stuff like that, and know all their names, so I decided I could make it a bird instead of a rabbit. And what was it about the idea of writing a children's book in Scots that had appealed to you? There are examples of Scots children's books out there, but they're quite frankly few and far between. There are some amazing translations in Scots like The Laddie, The Maudie, The Tod and The Cuddy, which is a beautiful book, and I guess you could call it a bit of an inspiration. But for me it was about wanting the next generation of kids to have access to original Scots books. There's always the argument that says to translate Harry Potter and parents will give it to their children because they know it's a popular story, whereas this is something new that's told in the language and the idea is that it's going to be one of a series. Some people might worry that exposing children to Scots books could be confusing for them and wonder if it could be better to concentrate on their English literary skills instead. You would presumably reject that. Scots literacy improves English literacy, but it can also engage children in a way that English might not. There's a lot of children in Scotland who, if you give them permission to write like that, you're going to engage them. And I know that things have changed and we've got the Scots Language Award and things like that, but Scots is still not fostered the way English is. When kids in Scotland are writing, they're still going to be writing in English. I just feel that there's loads of people who maybe, wouldn't be as engaged with English and Scots can get them into it. I've written a bit at the back of the book actually, in English, called Notes for Readers. It's addressed to children and saying that if they want to write stories of their own, they might actually find it easier to write them in Scots than in English. When I was young, I was a super broad Scots speaker. My dad worked in California for a year, and so we went out there to live for a bit. My mum filmed me at Disneyland, and it was such broad Scots that it was ridiculous. Much stronger even than it is now. And you know, I remember watching it back before I really knew that Scots was a language and actually being quite ashamed that I spoke like that. I mentioned that at the end of the book as well, and the idea is that other people shouldn't feel like that. It's rubbish. The Hullet That Couldn't Fly is published by Lewis Press on 30 November and is now available to pre-order. By James McKennany. Herald Scotland, recorded on Friday 17th of November 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Poverty in UK, the past is an all too familiar country. By Teddy Jameson, Senior Features Writer. The past is a foreign country, the novelist L.P. Hartley famously suggested. They do things differently there. Well, maybe, Leslie, but sometimes I think that's up for argument. Last weekend I popped into the Stills Gallery in Edinburgh. A new exhibition, Café Royal Books, has recently opened. It's a retrospective celebrating an independent publisher that has spent the last decade, and counting, producing weekly publications devoted to post-war British photography. These little zines, 600 of them, now all on display and available to browse at Stills, offer a comprehensive vision of the UK in recent decades, from working men's clubs to London nightlife, and from hippies at Stonehenge to Nelson Mandela in Glasgow. Gathered together, all these images fight for attention. It's really quite an electrifying exhibition, noisy and full of life. Coming away from Stills, it struck me that all the best exhibitions I've seen this year have been photography exhibitions, and all fall under the heading social documentary. In Liverpool's Walker Gallery, Tom Wood's photographs of the smeary condensation in the windows of Liverpool buses, customers at Butlins in Ayr, and kids on chopper bikes in Dunfermline back in the 1970s felt both distant and close at the same time. A retrospective of the photographs of the late Chris Killip in the Baltic Centre in Gateshead, which finished in September, offered a vision of the northeast of England in the 1980s that could have passed for the 1880s. All our yesterdays pinned and mounted in a wall. This weekend sees the opening of a new film from the Portobello-based director Paul Singh about the life and work of Newcastle photographer Tish Murtha. It is a thrilling, heartbreaking film about a great overlooked talent who's only now getting her due. Murtha caught the impact of deindustrialisation and Thatcherism as it impacted on her family, friends and community in striking black and white images. Murtha, like Wood and Killip, indeed, like many of the photographers whose work is on show at the Stills, all offer a challenging vision of the country we lived in. Their images are full of humanity and empathy, but often also document lack and want. This is the way we were 30, 40, 50 years ago. But there's a danger that we look at these images, see the black and white grain of so many of them, and conclude confidently that was then. That the deprivation they often depict can now be safely stored away as a thing of the past. If only. This winter, the Trussell Trust is expecting to provide more than 1 million emergency food parcels. In September, the charity reported that half of working families claiming universal credit had run out of food in the previous month, while a third had struggled to heat their homes. And according to the Trust, more than 14 million people now live below the poverty line. Meanwhile, last month, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation reported that in Scotland, more than 1 million people, around a quarter of them children, live in poverty, with nearly half, 490,000, in what it calls deep poverty. If my dodgy maths is right, that means that 1 in 11 of us in this country are really struggling. Tie that in with a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis, and the impact is obvious. It is a factor in why Scotland has the largest number of deaths as a result of drug misuse in Europe. Poverty kills. The Scottish Government has much work to do. I write this amid the fallout from the Supreme Court ruling declaring the Westminster Government's Rwanda plan unlawful, an unworkable, illegal fantasy played out at exorbitant cost by a government far more interested in chasing headlines than helping its neediest citizens. The reality is the world captured by the likes of Tish Murtha, Chris Killip and Tom Wood is really not so very far away. The clothes, the surroundings, the faces may have changed, but the problems remain. When it comes to those who most need our help, the past is not foreign enough. By Teddy Jameson.
The Herald on the 17th of November and the Voices section. Reading in Childhood Matters, Let's Make Sure It Continues, by Catherine Salmond. I remember having seen 7 teeth taken out when I was about 9 years old. There was no room for the big ones to come through, I was told, as I was put on a general anaesthetic in the dentist's chair, waking up later with a groggy, confused feeling, sore and incredibly gummy. The most vivid memory of that day is not the gas, though, nor the inability to eat or drink for some time after, nor going back to school the next day with huge gaps in my grin. No, it is of leaving the dentist proudly clutching a copy of Roald Dahl's Matilda, which my mum had secretly bought me in advance, hidden in her bag and produced when I came around from the anaesthetic. This was my treat for being brave, and I can remember the surge of love I had for her in that moment. And I can't remember what it feels like every page of that fantastic book, of going to bed early each night to devour it, desperate to read more, but aware that the more I read, the sooner the book would be finished. Some nights I would limit the number of pages I allowed myself, carefully working out how many evenings of sheer joy I had left. I grew up with books, with parents who enjoyed them, and siblings to share them with. I appreciate how lucky I was. My older sister had many of the Roald Dahl books, which I borrowed from her shelf and then put back. But Matilda was mine, a brand new copy just for me. I wrote my name on the inside just to make this point clear, and there it remains today as my daughter and I read the book together, just as I did with her big brothers before her. Decades down the line, I still get a thrill out of this very special book and the memory of my mum giving it to me. Why am I telling you this? Because this feeling matters in childhood. Every child in Scotland surely has have a chance to feel excited about getting a new book of their own. To own something valuable and precious, life-changing and magical. They should have their Matilda moment, minus the general anaesthetic preferably. And that is why this week we launched our Christmas appeal with Scottish Book Trust, asking readers to help buy new books for children this festive season. Not every child will love reading, that's a given, but every child deserves a chance to. The reality is that too many children living in poverty will not get a book this Christmas. Owning your own book is a powerful tool, no weapon for a child, said author Val McDermott, writing exclusively for us as we launched the appeal. It's something to enjoy, something to take pride in, something new, something indisputably theirs. Being able to read gives a child confidence to speak out, confidence to apply for jobs, confidence to break free from a life lacking in dignity and decency. Our Christmas appeal sees Scottish Book Trust organise the delivery of new books for children through food banks. I appreciate how much the cost of living crisis is impacting families, and the pressures over the winter months are some of the most severe. But if you can donate, be sure of the difference it will make to a child. For more details, visit ScottishBookTrust.com. Thank you. And that was by Catherine Salmond.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 20th of November. From the news section, Jagtar Singh Johal, brother hopes Cameron can secure release. Report by Jody Harrison. The brother of a Briton who has been detained in an Indian jail for more than 6 years has said he is hopeful the new Foreign Secretary can secure the blogger's release. Gurpreet Singh Johal said he hopes that Lord David Cameron, who made a dramatic return to frontline politics in a reshuffle last week, can use his expertise and leverage to bring his brother Jagtar Singh Johal home. Mr. Johal, from Dumbarton, Scotland, was in Punjab in northern India for his wedding in 2017 when his family said he was arrested and bundled into an unmarked car. He said he has been tortured, including through electric shocks, and faces the death penalty over his activism and campaigning for Sikh human rights. His brother Gurpreet Singh Johal said the family feel they have been failed by the UK government, but hope that former Prime Minister Lord Cameron can make a difference. He told BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland programme, "We are hopeful that this Foreign Secretary, well, first of all he has to meet us to confirm exactly what he is going to be doing to bring Jagtar back home. But really, enough is enough, because this government has really let down Jagtar and his family over the last 6 years." Rishi Sunak has said that he's using the experience of David Cameron, that's why he's brought him in, so we're hopeful that the contacts David Cameron has made over the years when he was the Prime Minister will be able to allow him to use that leverage and to do what all other Foreign Secretaries have failed to do, and basically call for Jagtar's release. because the UK government have a policy, and the policy is if you're arbitrarily detained, which the UN Working Group in Detention have found, that you should be calling for release. We're hopeful that the 6th Foreign Secretary, after 6 years, might do something that the other Foreign Secretaries have failed to do. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention last year said that the continued pre-trial detention of Mr Johal lacks legal basis and is arbitrary. Mr Johal has written to Lord Cameron urging him to work to secure his brother's release. Mr Johal said that robust action is needed to bring home his brother, who has been detained for 2,208 days, and that it is not just about soft diplomacy. He added, "The bottom line is my brother's life depends on what David Cameron decides to do and whether he decides to call for Jagtar's release to bring him back home." In his letter to Lord Cameron, Mr Johal wrote, "Jagtar is a British citizen, born and raised in Scotland, arbitrarily detained abroad on politically motivated charges and facing a possible death sentence. It must be a priority for the UK government to resolve his case and bring him home." Prime Minister Rishi Sunak raised the case of Mr Johal when he met the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the fringes of the G20 summit in New Delhi in September. At the time, he said that the government is committed to seeing Mr Johal's case resolved as soon as possible. Mr Johal said he last spoke to Jagtar on his brother's wedding anniversary on October 18th, and that his sibling is trying to stay positive and hopes he may be released on bail within months. He said he is hopeful in the next 6 months or so that he could at least be out on bail, but that's as much as I know because I don't know what situation he is in. He is trying to put light at the end of the tunnel by thinking that he will be out in the next 6 months, at least on bail. The Foreign Office has been asked for comment, and that article was by Jodie Harrison. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 20th of November, from the news section, exclusive. National Care Service plans criticised by SNP commissioned research. Article is an exclusive by David Ball. Scottish Government plans to centralise social care have been dealt another blow after research commissioned by SNP ministers concluded a feeling of unease over workforce impacts and called for funding to be better spent on improving existing services. Plans to take authority for adult social care away from local authorities and replace it with a centralised National Care Service were tabled at Holyrood in June 2022. But the legislation has been paused, with SNP Social Care Minister Marie Todd saying the delay was to undertake widespread engagement with people with lived experience, workforce representatives, unions, local government and providers. The legislation, due to come into force by 2026, also proposes moving responsibility for children's services, justice social work and mental health services, as well as adult social care, into a national care service, all of which will be overseen by Scottish ministers. The proposals have been heavily criticised by opponents and the umbrella organisation for Scottish councils, COSLA, which has warned against local authorities losing their say and influence over how services are run. Ministers asked for the Centre of Excellence for Children's Care and Protection, CELCIS, at Strathclyde University to investigate the impact the overhaul could have on children's services workforce in Scotland. CELCIS is a leading, internationally recognised research, improvement and innovation centre which specialises in the well-being and experiences of children and young people in need of care and protection, their families and carers. But the latest piece of research published by CELCIS has warned that the workforce is concerned about the extent of change being proposed by a national care service strategically, operationally and culturally, and in a challenging financial climate, which is already changing at a fast pace to fulfil existing commitment to approaches, legislation and policies. It adds that the main sentiment expressed about any potential reconstruction of Scotland's children's services was one of unease. The stark research would be that centralising care services would lead to significant upheaval at a time when the sector is under substantial pressure. It added that whatever the design of the restructure taken forward by ministers, no structure can encompass all services that children, young people and families need. It said, there will be consequently always be some boundaries where difficult services will need to work together to support children, young people and families, and at these boundaries where gaps and weaknesses in service provision can be most acute. There is an opportunity cost argument that the significant level of financial and human resources necessary to deliver a restructure would be better allocated to improving services, building inter-practitioner relationships and investing in the workforce. There was concern around whether Scotland's Children's Services leadership at the national and local level has the necessary skills, knowledge and capacity to deliver a significant restructure. Scottish Labour Deputy Leader and Social Care Spokesperson Jackie Bailey said, the SNP must listen to these stark warnings from workers in the front line of children's services. Scottish Labour has long called for a national care service to boost standards and better support care services, but so far all the SNP has delivered is a failed power grab. She added, years of SNP failure has left children's care services under immense pressure, and it is essential that these changes don't make things even worse. If the SNP is going to get back on track and deliver a national care service worthy of the name, it must have workers' voices at the heart of it. Scottish Conservative MSP Rose McCall said, even the SNP's own commissioned research has highlighted the serious flaws in their plans for a centralised care service. Their reckless and bureaucratic plans are the last thing our vulnerable children and those in the front line supporting them need at this time. She added, the SNP should heed the serious concerns raised in this research and scrap their plans for a national care service. Instead, they should divert the money earmarked towards cash-strapped local services to supporting children right now. Scottish Lib Dems leader Alex Cole-Hamilton said, SNP ministers have talked a lot of tosh about their plans for care services. As a former youth worker myself, I can well understand why those working in children's services would be sceptical about a dramatic upheaval and a top-down reorganisation of how services are run. He added, the key problems workers face, like tight budgets and a shortage of staff, will not be solved by more power concentrated in the hands of distant ministers. Scottish Liberal Democrats want to see more money spent on frontline services, not in bureaucratic wrangling. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, we are committed to a national care service that ensures consistent, high-quality social care support and community health care that meets people's needs across the country. This research will help us consider the future of children's services as we move forward, and we are ensuring the needs and views of young people and children are considered as part of the full range of design and development. The research suggests that having both the national and local elements working together for children is important, and we will consider whether including certain services would improve consistency in care. We strongly value all those supporting children and families and are committed to making sure that the structures of care are right, and we are constantly working to improve outcomes for children and young people across the country. And that article was an exclusive by David Ball.
From the Herald, Monday, 20th of November 2023, Sports Section. Scotland 3, Norway 3. Late Mohamed El-Yunusi goal denies Steve Clarke's men victory. By Matthew Lindsay, Chief Football Writer. Scotland failed to bring their 4-game winless run to an end or finish their remarkable Euro 2024 qualifying campaign on a huge high at Hampden tonight when they were held to a 3-3 draw by Norway. National team manager Steve Clarke, whose charges clinched their place at the finals in Germany with 2 Group A games to spare last month, was without many of his mainstays due to injuries and had to field an under-strength starting lineup. At times it showed. Stale Sobakakin's men took the lead twice, first through Aaron Dunham and then when Jorgen Larsson, but John McGinn scored a penalty kick. Leo Ostegard put the ball into his own net at a Scott McTominay corner, and Stuart Armstrong put the hosts ahead. However, Mohamed El-Yunusi, the former Celtic loanee who is now at Copenhagen, came off the bench and nodded a leveller for Norway, with 4 minutes of regulation time left on the clock. After losses to England, Spain and France and a draw with Georgia, it was a hugely frustrating denouement for Clarke. He's eager for Scotland to start building momentum ahead of the tournament. Still, seeing his team come from behind twice and take the lead will have pleased him greatly. This, though, was a night for the Tartan Army to laud their heroes for achieving their objective, not to lament their shortcomings. The home supporters in the 48,183 strong crowd duly obliged. There was a definite party atmosphere inside the packed ground, even though it was effectively a dead rubber. The home fans stayed inside the stadium long after Romanian referee Horatiu Fesnic had blown the final whistle, as Captain McGinn and his teammates did a lap of honour, and Yes Sir, I Can Boogie blurred out all over the public address system. Here are a few talking points from the encounter. Clark was unconcerned about Scotland winning the game by 2 clear goals, finishing Euro 2024 qualifying as the best second-place team and securing a place in Pot 2 when the draw was made in Hamburg on Saturday week, when he spoke at his pre-match press conference on Saturday afternoon. He will not then be too bothered about the final outcome at the end of the 90 minutes. A quick glance at the calibre of the teams who will be going into Pot 3 shows exactly why. There are no easy victories in international football, and would have been disrespectful and presumptuous of the manager to send his team out to win by a certain margin. Clark made 4 changes to the team which took to the field in Tbilisi on Thursday night. Jack Hendry replaced Ryan Porteous at centre-half. Kenny McLean and Armstrong took over from Billy Gilmore, and Ryan Christie and Jacob Brown was preferred to Lyndon Dykes in attack. The side of McLean on the left side of the three-quarter line will not have been well received by the visitors. The Norwich City midfielder came off the bench and scored an injury-time winner against them in Oslo back in June. But Manchester City winger Oscar Bob ran riot down the right flank. He very much got the better of McLean and Celtic left-back Greg Taylor. Both of the Norway goals in the opening 45 minutes originated down that side. McLean is, as he showed over in Norway in the summer, a handy man to have in the national squad. He got a touch on the McTominay corner, which Østegård inadvertently turned past Egil Selvik. But he does not deserve to start ahead of the likes of Christie or McGinn on this evidence. He was replaced by Lewis Ferguson with 20 minutes remaining. Taylor, who did not have his best evening in a dark blue jersey, must up his game significantly to secure a place on the flight to Germany. If Andy Robertson, Kieran Tierney and Aaron Hickey are fit, and it is hoped and expected they will be, he'll be left at home. Lawrence Shanklin's injury-time equaliser against Georgia in the Dynamo Arena in midweek had prompted a flurry of debate about whether the Hearts captain, who had been overlooked for the original squad, deserved more game time and possibly even merited a start. But the man who only came in when Shea Adams was forced to withdraw was on the bench when the game kicked off this evening. Jacob Brown of Luton Town was given the chance to show what he was capable of and handed his first start. The 8 times capped striker has never, unlike Shankland, found the net for his adopted homeland. Could he get off the mark in this meaningless fixture? Alas, he could not. He worked tirelessly with the limited service which he received from those behind him, and did his cause no harm whatsoever. Shankland came on at the death as Scotland pushed for a winner, but Adams and Lyndon Dykes, who replaced Brown in the second half, remain the best forwards that Clark has at his disposal. McGinn scored 7 goals in Scotland Euro 2020 qualifying, but 3 of those came against San Marino. Steve Fletcher has also plundered that many during the national team's ill-fated bid to reach the Euro 2016 finals 4 years earlier. The striker, though, hit hat-tricks against Gibraltar, home and away. In the Euro 2024 campaign, Manchester United midfielder McTominay has claimed doubles against Cyprus and Spain at home, and has found a target against Georgia, both home and away, as well as Cyprus away. He has not amassed his impressive tally then against minnows. There were no goals for the man who qualifies to play for his country through his father tonight. However, he performed to his usual high level alongside Callum McGregor of Celtic, who picked up the Man of the Match award in the 4-2-3-1 formation which Clark opted for, and equalled the Scottish striker record for a qualifying campaign with 2nd from 8. If only that second half stunner against Spain in Seville had been allowed to stand. That article was by Matthew Lindsay.
This is from the Herald Scotland on Monday the 20th of November 2023 from Voices section. Scotland is much nicer than the rest of the UK. Not really. Report by Mark Smith, feature writer. People sometimes say Scotland is more liberal and progressive and nicer than other parts of the UK, particularly the you-know-who's south of the border. But the truth is that Scots sometimes are, and sometimes aren't, better than our neighbours. I know that doesn't fit quite so neatly on the kind of placards people wave about on marches, but that's how it goes. The subject of gay rights and trans rights proves the point clearly. When the Scottish Government was preparing its trans self-ID bill, Nicola Sturgeon, avec on Choose Love t-shirt, was named the Honorary Grand Marshal of Pride Glasgow and went out on a march and did a speech and everything. "I'm proud," she said, "that Scotland is considered to be one of the most progressive countries in Europe regarding LGBT equality." In some ways, Miss Sturgeon was spot on. Scotland is undoubtedly considered to be one of the most progressive countries in Europe regarding LGBT equality, but it's a reputation that's not entirely deserved. In the speech, Miss Sturgeon referred to a young man called Blair Wilson from Nielsen who was targeted in a homophobic attack. After the attack, Blair took a picture of the blood running down his face. The blood running down a young man's face is not generally a sign of a liberal and tolerant society. Undoubtedly, attitudes more generally have changed. In fact, on gay marriage, the shift has been remarkably swift, going from most are against to most are in favour in a very short time indeed. But the bigger point is it's the UK as a whole, rather than Scotland in particular, that shifted. Surveys of attitudes around the world show the UK to be amongst the most liberal on gay rights, divorce, abortion and euthanasia, and that includes Scots. In other words, we're broadly the same as the English. Again, not something you're going to see on placards anytime soon. So where does that leave the idea that Scots are more left-wing and progressive than the English? The truth is, the Scots are more left-wing, but only by a little. The other problem is that left-wing and Scottish nationalist are often conflated with liberal and socially progressive, and that's not always what it's like in reality. The political research group What Scotland Thinks did some interesting work recently which showed 40% of people with socially conservative views support Scottish independence, and you could see it in the internal struggles that happened in the SNP over issues such as abortion and trans rights. Scots should also try to be modest about our achievements on gay rights in particular. This week is exactly 20 years since Section 28 was repealed in England and Wales, and Robbie DeSantos, of the campaign group Stonewall, explained what the law, which banned the promotion of homosexuality, meant for many people. A whole generation, he said, were deprived of the chance to see role models in their lives because teachers were outlawed from telling them about same-sex relationships. And that's true, and means the anniversary of the end of the law is undoubtedly something we should be celebrating. As it happens, Scotland's story was a little bit different. In fact, it may be a source of pride to some Scots, especially those who think we're generally better than the English, that the Scottish Parliament abolished Scotland's version of the Section 28 law 3 years earlier than the English and Welsh bill. The only problem is that the headline, "Well good," hides something deeper, and I was there to see it. It was early 2000 when it reached its height. I was working for the Daily Record, which threw its weight behind the Keep the Clause campaign to prevent the repeal of Section 28 in Scotland. The campaign was led by Brian Souter, who was a supporter of the SNP, just saying, and day after day the paper published pieces explaining why they thought Souter was right and Section 28 should stay. And, in a rare act of rebellion, I told my editor I wouldn't work on the stories. I'm quite proud of myself for saying that. In fact, looking back, assuming that the editors of the Record in 2000 wanted to chime with their readers, they may have made the right call at the time. Daily Record readers were generally Labour voting, but a lot of them were also socially conservative, and that was probably borne out by the fact that when Souter held his referendum on keeping Section 28 in Scotland, 1 million Scots voted in favour. 1 million! Blimey! It's also worth remembering that Scotland was very late to the party indeed in decriminalising homosexuality. England got round to it in the 1960s, but it took Scotland until the 1980s, to do the same. It's also worth remembering who was Prime Minister at the time. The one lots of Scots love to hate, and the one who introduced Section 28 as it happens. But remember also that Margaret Thatcher supported decriminalisation long before Scotland was ready to accept it, and her support came from a pragmatic view that the state generally keep out of people's private lives and that the court should spend their time on something more important. In other words, it was classic conservatism converging with social progress, which happens way more than you'd think. Which only leaves, I suppose, one subject to tackle, which is, what have we really learned from the repeal of Section 28 some 20 years ago, and have we really moved on? There are some who say definitely not, and that the arguments over trans rights are similar to the arguments that raged over Section 28. The fear-mongering over the self-ID bill, they say, is the fear-mongering of the Keep the Clause campaign. But again, I was there, and I'm inclined to think now that the two cases are not directly comparable. Gay rights campaigners argued for equality in law, in work, in schools, and in the end, the equality could be enshrined in law without threatening or damaging the human rights of any other group. The problem with the trans debate 20 years on, and even trans activists need to accept this, is that the rights claimed by two groups in society are overlapping and clashing, and some kind of compromise will need to be found. The arguments made by feminists against self-ID also self-evidently do not come from the socially conservative place that the Keep the Clause campaign dominated in 2000. In the end, the furore over self-ID also proves the central point here, which is that broadly, Scotland is just as liberal or anti-liberal, conservative or progressive as England. There was a time when Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP leadership thought they could prove that Scotland was ahead of the rest of the UK by passing their self-ID bill. But we know what happened to that, don't we? And it happened in Scotland for the same reason that a similar law hasn't been passed in England. We haven't reached an acceptable consensus on the subject yet, and, if the compromise is to be found, Scotland and our friends and neighbours in the rest of the UK will probably find it at exactly the same time. That report was by Mark Smith. This is from the Herald Scotland on Monday, the 20th of November 2023. From Voices section. The Herald Diary, Divine Comedy. Report by Lorne Jackson. Trevor Muir spotted this van in North Berwick, which reads, "The Dogfather, a walk you can't refuse." He jokes, "If you mess with them, I wonder if you end up with a dog's head in your pillow." Divine Comedy. Our more observant readers have noticed that former Prime Minister David Cameron has returned to frontline politics. Unfortunately, this means he'll have to sacrifice the successful career he has forged outside the world of Westminster, which largely involved him sitting immobile in his living room, glaring at the wall, a solitary tear trickling down his cheek, while he repeatedly hissed to himself, "Brexit, bleedin' Brexit." The diary is delighted that Dave the Divine is back in public life. His resurrection reminds reader Alan Kent of Mr. Cameron's Hug a Hoodie campaign. Says Alan, "I always thought he missed a trick with that one. The PR hoopla surrounding it should have labelled him Cam Cuddles Bam." Morbidly muddled message. A diary reader tells us that, unfortunately, he has been dealing with a protracted health issue this year. He was therefore somewhat taken aback when the message he was about to send to rendezvous with his wife used predictive text to change "meet you back at the coffee shop" to "meet you back at the coffin." Bedtime story. We mentioned the district on the Isle of Lewis with the curious name of Back, which inspires Malcolm Boyd from Mulgai to tell us that his mother's side of the family came from that neck of the woods, and he recalls a particular matrimonial story that took place there. Says Malcolm, "When the telegrams were being read at the wedding of two of our neighbours, the best man laughed as he read out, 'There'll be no going back to Back tonight.' Roll with it. We're figuring out what certain objects would be called if they had been named by the same bright spark who decided to call a two-way radio a walkie-talkie. George Kirkland from Bearsden says, "Perhaps ladies' heated hairdryers could be called curly-wurlies. No, wait, I think Cadbury might have thought of that before. Well, back to the drawing board, or drafty-wafty. Rock and Railway. As many of you will know, there is a piano in Glasgow Central Station, which is free to play by any commuter who happens to have a tuneful touch. Reader Bill Haggerty was listening to one musical bloke give it laldy on the keyboard, when another chap enjoying the free concert said approvingly, 'That dude's got boogie in his woogie.' Pay-per-view. Amused Terry McGeary from East Kilbride says, 'I was creasing myself the other day when a friend explained the manifold benefits of joining the local origami club.' That report was by Lauren Jackson.
The Herald on the 21st of November and the news section. A&E weights improve but calls to sack Michael Matheson continue by Tom Gordon. The performance in Scotland's A&E units has improved after hitting a 10-month low last week, but more than a third of patients are still waiting too long. Public Health Scotland reported that 64% of patients were seen within the official 4-hour target in the week ending November 12, up from 60.8% the previous week. There are also slight improvements in the number of patients enduring extreme waits. The number waiting more than 8 hours fell from 3,758 to 3,237, from 15.1 to 13% of patients. And the number waiting more than 12 hours fell from 1,671 to 1,438, 6.7 to 5.8%. However, the numbers were still among the highest recorded since the spring. Scottish Tories said that SNP Secretary Michael Matheson had his eye well and truly off the ball and should be sacked. The target for 95% of patients to be admitted, transferred or discharged within 4 hours, it has not been met nationally since July 2020. The worst performing health board last week was NHS Forth Valley, with just 41.4% of patients seen within 4 hours. Then NHS Lanarkshire, 57.9%, and NHS Lothian, 59.2%. The improved figures are a welcome scrap of good news for Mr. Matheson, who is facing calls to resign over an £11,000 bill for his Hollywood iPad. After initially blaming an old SIM card, the Falkirk West MSPs admitted his teenage sons had run up huge data charges watching football while on holiday in Morocco at New Year. Tory MSP Dr. Sandesh Gulhane said Michael Matheson's eye has been well and truly off the ball as our NHS looks set to plunge into a state of winter chaos. In his own backyard in NHS Forth Valley, only 4 in 10 patients are now being seen in time in A&E, which is truly terrifying and absolutely appalling. It is now the shocking norm on the SNP's watch that across Scotland over a third of patients are not seen within 4 hours. That tragically leads to needless, endless deaths, despite the best efforts of my dedicated colleagues on the front line. We have a lame duck and a lying health secretary, whose position is simply untenable in charge of our A&E departments. He went on, the last thing suffering patients and staff needs is a health secretary totally distracted by a personal scandal engulfing him. If he won't do the right thing and resign, Hamza Yousaf should sack him. And that was by Tom Gordon. The Herald on the 21st of November and the news section. Glasgow Vital Spark pub sold to become flat development by Brian Donnelly. A former pub earmarked for flats for disabled people has been sold. The Vital Spark in Govan Road in Glasgow is set to be turned into flats for disabled people. The scale was handled by Cornerstone business agents, and while the value of the transaction was not disclosed, it's been on the market at a guide price of £215,000. Lyndhouse Housing Association was recently granted permission by Glasgow City Council to convert the Vital Spark, which was previously Fairfield Bar. 2 two-bedroom flats are planned, with one accessed from Govan Road and the other from Clacton Drive. They will both have access to the commercial bank court at 1147 Govan Road, which is also owned by the Housing Association. Council planners said earlier that generally this arrangement would not be acceptable, given the risk of a division of ownership from the proposed units and the back court. Cornerstone said Govan Road provides a mix of retail and commercial businesses serving this highly populated area of the city. The subjects form the ground floor of the Victorian-style 4-storey tenement property. Internally, the property comprises main bar, kitchen, preparation area, WCs and basement cellar. The schedule continued. The availability of the subject offers a variety of potential uses. Subject to change of use, the property would also be suitable for retail or residential use. The subjects are also being sold on a rarely available freehold basis, making this an ideal opportunity for landlord and investor purchasers. And that was by Brian Donnelly. The Herald on the 21st of November, and the news section. Humza Yousaf, mother-in-law breaks silence on Gaza ordeal, by Jodie Harrison. Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf's mother-in-law has said she left her heart in Gaza, having been struck there amid the Israel-Hamas conflict. Elizabeth and Magad El Nakla, the parents of Mr Yousaf's wife Nadia, were visiting relatives last month when the conflict broke out, leaving them trapped in the Palestinian territory for weeks. Miss El Nakla from Dundee said she and her husband experienced a living nightmare when bombings began in the region. The couple were able to return to Scotland earlier this month after being permitted to pass through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt. Miss El Nakla told Sky News, "It still feels very surreal, waking up in the middle of the night and I hear silence and in the dark. And then I remember I'm at home, that I'm safe. I feel very grateful for that. I walked down to my sister-in-law, who lives 5 minutes away, in the rain, in the dark, but feeling safe. I think no one can understand how that makes you feel when you've been in a situation where you think you may die. Unfortunately, until our family and the people that we know and love and everyone in Gaza are safe, I don't think we will get it. I think my life has changed forever." Speaking of the conflict, Miss El Nakla said, "I wouldn't wish that situation on my worst enemy." The couple managed to leave the region on November 3 after 2 failed attempts. Miss El Nakla spoke of losing hope so many times, also telling of fears about never getting home. She added, "I hadn't slept for 48 hours. I hadn't slept for nearly 3 weeks, and you're just so relieved. But you still don't believe it, and you're so exhausted. Then you get on the bus, and you see all these happy children. We were given a bottle of water and a pack of biscuits, and it's such a relief. You can't imagine. But again, your heart is torn. I left my heart in Gaza, and I didn't bring it home with me." And that was by Jodie Harrison. The Herald on the 21st November, and the news section. SNP's lack of climate adaptation putting economy at greater risk, by David Bowell. Independent advisers have raised serious concern over a lack of progress in adapting to the impacts of the climate crisis in Scotland, worrying the country could be put at increasing risk of damaging cascading impacts across the economy when more extreme weather events strike. In a stark and damning report on Scotland's progress in climate change adaptation, the Climate Change Committee, CCC, the statutory advisers for the UK and Scottish governments, has told ministers that progress on adaptation remains slow and that important gaps remain. The annual report to the Scottish Government has stressed that there is a clear need for further urgent action on adaptation in Scotland. The CCC has said that since its last report in 2022, recent weather extremes have continued to highlight Scotland's ongoing vulnerability to weather and climate extremes, with the country not immune to the frontline impacts of the climate crisis. Last year was Scotland's hottest on record, with the country's hottest ever day taking place in July 2022, when the temperatures almost reached 35 degrees centigrade in the Scottish borders. Amid soaring temperatures, last summer, heat guidance was issued to the public in order to limit the impact of the conditions on people's health. Early last month saw widespread and prolonged rainfall in parts of Scotland, which led to significant flooding. This was compounded later last month when Storm Babbitt swept across the UK, bringing record-breaking rainfall totals and river levels in north-east Scotland. The CCC's report sets out that flooding was widespread, leading to several deaths and hundreds of homes impacted alongside transport and power system disruptions. It added the recent weather extremes highlight the urgency with which the adaptation, delivery and planning gaps identified in our report must be addressed. Both heat waves and heavy rainfall are being made more intense by climate change in Scotland. In future, hotter and drier summers are expected, leading to hotter heat waves and warmer and wetter winters. Alongside rising sea levels will continue to increase flood risks. But the report warns that there remain areas where the current state of adaptation policy gives serious concern. The analysis points to insufficient policies and plans for water supply across Scotland, pointing to gaps in drought resilience standards and insufficient leakage reduction targets. It adds identifying and managing interdependencies across infrastructure sectors remains limited. The lack of action will put Scotland at increasing risk of damaging cascading impacts across the economy when the weather extremes occur in the future. The CCC has warned that overall progress in adapting to climate change in Scotland remains slow, particularly on delivery and implementation. It adds that for only 1 out of the 33 outcomes identified by the Committee for Climate Resilience across devolved areas do we find good progress on adaptation delivery. The CCC has called for the Scottish Government's next adaptation plan, which is due to be published next year, to embed adaptation in upcoming legislation and drive delivery. The report adds it needs to ensure that there are quantified targets for climate resilience, that there are clear linkages between activities and outcomes with clear ownership of delivery, and must finally address the long-standing absence of an effective monitoring and evaluation system. For it to address the current shortfall in adaptation delivery, it must seek to unlock public and private investment in adaptation and be fully integrated with the upcoming legislation and cross-government objectives on decarbonisation, health and nature. Chris Stark, the CEO of the CCC, said significant flooding just last month demonstrated the impact of more extreme weather in Scotland. Yet we find that progress on adapting to climate change remains too slow. He added, while there have been some notable steps forward on policy, this isn't being matched in the delivery and implementation of adaptation measures in Scotland. Scotland's next national adaptation plan must embed resilience to climate change in new legislation and drive real improvements that prepare Scotland for the changing climate. The Scottish Government has been contacted for comment. And that was by David Bowl.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 21st of November 2023 from the business section. Edinburgh Swimming, small private training pool for sale. This article is by Brian Donnelly. A private swimming pool at a prime city centre site has been put on the market for sale. Cornerstone Business Agents is handling the freehold sale of the profitable pool that is 14 feet long, 8 feet wide and 4 feet deep. The agent said the business offers a training pool and the opportunity of personal coaching in a relaxed environment. The agent said the business is profitable and best suited to hands-on operator. The business, created in 2016 by the present owner, said there was scope to develop and expand on the current operation. Edinburgh Swim Studio is located on Thistle Street, North West Lane, in the heart of the city centre, said Cornerstone. This part of the city centre is known as the Golden Rectangle, which represents a central location in Edinburgh's new town between St Andrew Square and Charlotte Square, incorporating all the streets and locations within. All the main Edinburgh attractions are within a short stroll, including the Castle, Royal Mile, Holyrood Palace and the new St James Quarter, which offers a wealth of shopping and eating opportunities. The agent continued, "There is an L-shaped hallway on entering, with office immediately on the right. The main room on the left houses the swimming pool, along with the required equipment, with the remainder of the premises occupied by accessible shower and toilet and wet room, separate shower and utility, kitchen and plant room. We estimate the subjects extend to 561 square feet. The Edinburgh Swim Studio is an almost unique style of business which was created by our client in 2015 and opened for use in 2016. Cornerstone also said, offering a facility to everyone from non-swimmers to professional athletes, the pool is 14 feet long, 8 feet wide and 4 feet deep. When you are not swimming, you can touch the floor anywhere in the pool or take a break on the in-pool benches. The coach is never more than an arm's length away, with seating beside the pool for parents bringing in children for lessons. It has a swim current that is adjustable from 0 to race pace to suit any client, with under and over water cameras to allow coaching to every level. The freehold guide price is £260,000. This article was by Brian Donnelly.
The Herald on the 21st of November and the Arts and Ents section. Pink Glasgow 2024, How to Get Tickets, Dates and Venue by Ginny Sanderson. Pink has just announced 2 Scottish dates for her 2024 tour. The So What singer is returning to the UK and Europe due to unprecedented demand with her Summer Carnival World Tour. The 44-year-old, known for her live acrobatic displays and lightning-fast costume changes, will take to the stage at Hampden Park Stadium in Glasgow in June 2024. She's likely to perform classics like Get the Party Started, Raise Your Glass, Just Like a Pill, and Don't Let Me Get Me to fans. Pink will also be performing in the UK in Cardiff, London and Liverpool. Here's when she's back and how to get tickets to see her in Glasgow. To be in with a chance of getting your hands on tickets for the Pink shows in Glasgow, you need to register for access to ticket sales on Ticketmaster. Tickets are limited and will be granted through a random selection process, which the website says helps reduce bots. Fans who register will receive a unique access code which will allow them to access the sale. Tickets are available on a first-come, first-served basis. You can fill in the registration form on the Ticketmaster website for your preferred shows. Then on Monday, November 27, if you've been randomly selected for the sale, you will receive the unique code. Or if you have been waitlisted, you may be randomly selected to join the sale if tickets are still available. For those with a code, tickets go on sale on November 30 at 10 a.m. on the Ticketmaster website. Good luck. And that was by Ginny Sanderson.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 21st of November 2023 from the business section. Response to levelling up money for Glasgow's Drumchapel area. This article is by Katrina Stewart. A Levelling Up funding award for one of Glasgow's most socio-economically deprived areas has received mixed reaction and allegations of council officers cherry-picking pet projects. Glasgow City Council has been awarded nearly £15 million for the regeneration of Drumchapel Town Centre, bringing new walking and cycling routes and work to tackle flooding. While the cash injection has been warmly welcomed by the leader of the council, local politician has expressed frustration that other projects have missed out on a share of the Westminster funding pot. Councillor Susan Aitken, leader of Glasgow City Council, said of the £14,979,646 award, the success of this bid is testament to the hard work of officers, local members and the whole community, and their ambition for Drumchapel. I'm confident the project will secure real economic, environmental and social benefits by delivering enhanced community facilities, better connected local shops and services, and enable new housing and green space. It is a further chance at success for the city, which missed out on funding for 2 other projects at the last round of Levelling Up allocation. Level Up funding, which was created to replace the EU's structural funds and is allocated by Michael Gove's department, has long been criticised by the Scottish Government as it does not allow for ministers in Edinburgh to have any say or influence on how the money is spent. The latest funding comes on top of the £343 million already allocated to Scotland in previous rounds, meaning Scotland has received £465 million. Labour MSP Paul Sweeney said the Glasgow funding was undoubtedly good news for Drumchapel, but was far from being a top priority for the city. Mr. Sweeney had previously thrown his weight behind a funding bid to renovate Springburn Winter Gardens, an A-listed glasshouse that has lain derelict for 4 decades. He said, whilst this is good news for Drumchapel, if we take a Glasgow-wide view, I don't think it's the top priority for capital investment in the city, and it's deeply disappointing that there's been minimal consultation with parliamentary representatives about what's the best investment for Glasgow. We've just had a rehash of an already problematic round 2, which saw council officers foist their pet projects onto elected members, rather than allowing communities and elected members with a mandate from the people to determine what the city should be investing in. Mr. Sweeney pointed to plans for a boulevard project that would have converted a motorway flyover to a boulevard and seen repairs carried out to a structurally unsound bridge. The MSP added, why was it that not a higher priority was given to the environmental improvements for the area next to the country's largest hospital? He said the choice of funding allocation by the UK government seemed haphazard and had missed Glasgow's main priorities. Mr. Sweeney added, Springburn Winter Gardens, the city's A-listed glasshouse that's been derelict for 40 years this year, in an area like Springburn that's had minimal capital investment for at least 20 years, would have been more deserving, as well as the People's Palace, which has been a long-running major concern for the city. That was a Levelling Up nomination project. Why wasn't that financed? It just seems peculiar. It almost feels like a haphazardly selected project. Any investment in Glasgow is great. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I should emphasise that. But if you're going to take a wider view of the city's overall priorities, it doesn't seem like it's a number 1 priority for £15 million of capital investment right now. Mr. Sweeney's criticism with regards to Springburn Winter Gardens is levelled at the Council's SNP administration, which blocked an attempt by Springburn Winter Gardens Trust, which the Labour politician leads, to apply for Levelling Up money. The Council is in charge of deciding which projects go forward to the bidding process, a process that is highly costly for local authorities. At a previous round of Levelling Up funding, Glasgow City Council was awarded £13 million for the restoration of stables in Pollock Park. The Council previously said the decision not to support the Springburn plans was made by its officers during an evaluation of the proposals before this was agreed by its City Administration Committee. The Council can submit after 7 bids, 1 per constituency, as well as 1 large-scale transportation project. That article was by Katrina Stewart.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.